Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
The Broncos and Browns just played one of the best games of the year. What do we make of that? Also, we're playing the Wrap It Up music in San Francisco. And why would an at-large bid want to play in their conference championship game in college football? Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started.
I'm Peter Bukowski, starting your day with the can't-miss stories and biggest debates in sports. You're Locked On Sports Today.
Searching all major sports. Found.
Let's start with the biggest story.
The Browns and Broncos played on Monday night in one of the most entertaining football games of the year in the NFL. It was a back and forth, high scoring 41-32 win by the Denver Broncos that required 3 interceptions, including a pair of pick sixes on Jameis Winston, who also had almost 500 yards and 4 touchdowns. Sarah Bettinger from Locked On Broncos is here to help us make sense of all of this. And Sarah, on the one hand, the Broncos showed they can win in a shootout, which they're probably going to have to do if they want to do anything in the AFC playoff race. On the other hand, they've hung their hat on their defense all year, and Jameis absolutely lit them up for long stretches in this game. So what is your takeaway here?
Well, the takeaway first and foremost is you got to the bye at 8-5, and that's the biggest news of the night for the Broncos. But you're right. I mean, the pass defense was atrocious. I was shocked to see that they didn't take Levi Wallace out of the game until, it was late in the fourth quarter there. So that was a surprise. But of course, Riley Moss not playing in this game. We hope and expect that he'll be back. Now I better set up a little shrine behind me, Peter, as we're getting ready, because we need Riley Moss to get back out there. Apparently, he's been that important to this team, and he has been very good. But, man, it was a tough night for the Broncos secondary, but they pulled through when they needed to most.
Yeah, and there's going to be games like this every week, every year. We see, like the Ravens, for example, historically good offensively, and a couple games this year they've just kind of not really had it. And so I don't think you can say, look, the Broncos defense, they're not as good as we thought. They had a bad night. You hope, right? The offense, though, you have to be excited about what you're seeing from the development of Bo Nix. How have you seen him grow and change over the last, let's call it 6-8 weeks?
He's just so confident out there. That's the best thing that we've seen from him. Like that Seattle game back in week 1, you could tell that, he was rattled, and that's a tough environment to go into, your first ever NFL game out there in Seattle. But man, you kind of felt like, all right, is it too big for him? Is he going to be able to adjust to the speed of the game? And you see that week after week that he's adjusting to the speed of the game. He's got a great feel for pressure coming at him, and he's doing a lot of this with the Broncos, frankly, not having a very good running game. So teams are sending a lot at him, and he's been able to make some big throws to extend drives, big throws in the red zone, a little bit to clean up there in that regard from this game in particular. But man, you just can't help but be confident when he drops back, as opposed to kind of just bracing yourself for the worst.
Yeah, and he's played like someone who did not, or played like someone who heard all of the comments about, oh, he was a reach, and Sean Payton, he couldn't have really had all this confidence in him. He has exceeded, I think, all reasonable expectations of what he could be. Has he made you reconsider what the ceiling of this version of the Broncos can be with him as quarterback?
I think so, because at the beginning of the year, it was, I think you and I even talked about this back then. It was like, all right, if you can make the playoffs, like that's kind of your best case scenario, or just kind of backing in, just being a little bit better. That was the goal of ownership all along, was to be just a little bit better than last year. And last year was 8 wins. So you're asking a lot with a rookie quarterback. And I think that this Broncos team, they've proven, even that game you go back a handful of weeks ago against Kansas City, like they've proven that they have mettle in big games like this. Defensively, offensively, that game against Kansas City that came down to the field goal. That was Bo Nix putting them in that position. So they've had to go both ways. You need your defense to step up. They've done it. You need the offense to step up. They've done it, and they've done it with the best of the best in the AFC. So it's kind of interesting to see, if you get to the dance, what could happen.
Well, that is, I think, the question here with Denver. There seems to be a clear hierarchy in the AFC, maybe 3 teams at the top, And then this next group of teams, the AFC West, turns out way more competitive than we thought it would be coming into the season. Where do you think this Broncos team, in terms of what they can actually accomplish this year, where is a reasonable set of outcomes here in the postseason?
I think you could win a game in the playoffs. I do. I don't know that the Broncos are, obviously they don't have a quarterback that's as playoff tested as somebody like, Lamar, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes. Like, those guys have been in those games, and certainly they play like it in those moments when you get to January football. This team hasn't really tasted January football, but luckily you've got a head coach who's been there before, and you've got a lot of players on this team that they intentionally brought in from winning teams to be able to kind of say, hey, this Broncos team has done nothing since Super Bowl 50. So we got to sign guys that can come in and bring that championship, like, hey, we've been there mentality. So they have an interesting mix that they could be a dangerous team, Peter. But I mean, at this point, like, optimistically, you want to hope that maybe they can get hot at the right time. But I think realistically, maybe you say, hey, get into the playoffs, try to go win a game. I think they might be close to potentially going to Pittsburgh to face off against Russell Wilson. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you're getting to that point. It would be very, very interesting. I think the AFC is so wide open this year with what we've seen from the top teams in that conference.
You can stay up to date all year on the Denver Broncos by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Broncos on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. You're Locked On Sports Today. Coming up, looks like it's a wrap for the 49ers in 2024. Before we get to why, there's one Steeler who needs to grow up. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more near you. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. The Pittsburgh Steelers' number one target is George Pickens. He narrowly missed getting ejected from Pittsburgh's win in Cincinnati, though, because of multiple personal foul calls against him. Mike Tomlin, head coach, did not mince words after the game when it came to his budding star.
You just got to grow up, man. It's an emotional game, man. These divisional games are big. He got a target on his back because he's George. He understands that. But he's got to grow up. He's got to grow up in a hurry.
The Celtics welcomed the dreaded Heat, maybe not so dreaded anymore, to the TD Garden.
It was just ugly. Once again, for two straight games here with the Celtics missing key guys, they were searching. This was another game of searching for what's going to work. The Celtics are very good at understanding 48-minute game is a long time. It's okay. 7-0 run to start the game for Miami. Not great, but it's the beginning of the game. You got 40-plus minutes, 45 minutes to figure it out. You got plenty of time to figure things out. So whether it was Cleveland, where you had to grind without Derek White, without Jaylen Brown, this one, no Al Horford, no Kristaps Porzingis, no Drew Holiday, no Sam Hauser, personal reasons for Sam Hauser. Let's hope everything is okay there. And so the Celtics, they start Jordan Walsh. They start Luke Cornett. They go with different lineups. You have to be willing to play certain things out. You have to be willing to give these guys some leeway. What's working, what's not, who has it, who doesn't. And you roll with it. And the Celtics were just rolling with it. They're on the back-to-back. Miami's on the back-to-back. What this game boiled down to was the Celtics, even though they were missing four key guys, just have more firepower. They had more than what Miami had on the back-to-back. They were missing Jimmy Butler. They were missing Kevin Love. They very clearly looked like they were on the back-to-back. The Celtics did too, but also Peyton Pritchard seems to be immune from back-to-backs. Luke Cornett came in and played great defense. If I could tell right away that he was going to have a good defensive game.
And in some offseason baseball news, the Chicago Cubs signed a southpaw who's more than meets the eye.
I'm intrigued. It's an intriguing signing. Why? You can't look at Matthew Boyd's full career. because we live in this day and age where guys are constantly reinventing themselves as pitchers, constantly changing. The variance from year to year from these pitchers is a thing. And he came back from an elbow injury in 2024, and in 39 innings plus 11 in the postseason, he really flashed. In the regular season, he had a 2.72 ERA, he struck out 46 guys in those 39 innings, and just he basically became a different pitcher than what he was the prior years, mainly in Detroit. He started using his changeup a lot more, which really kind of changed things for him, no pun intended, less slider usage, all those things. And he looked really, really good. And so clearly the Cubs scouted him. Clearly the Cubs don't think that it's a mirage. They think that this is a real change, and it's real sustainable, and he's going to take that momentum from 2024, take it right into 2024, take it right into 2025, and the Cubs will get a bargain at that 2-year, $29 million a year range, because they think he is the pitcher that we saw in 39 innings in 2024, which slots right into the Cubs rotation.
The aesthetics were immaculate. The uniforms, the setting in Orchard Park, absolutely perfect. December football conditions, snow on the ground, 49ers, Bills, and a game that was really over before it even started. 35-10, Buffalo took care of the San Francisco 49ers. The Niners now 2 games below 500, 5-7, still kind of technically in the race in the NFC West. Brian Peacock from Locked On 49ers and Peacock and Williamson joins me now. And Brian, I have to start with the obvious question. Is it just over now? With Christian McCaffrey set to miss the rest of the season, we think, and this team not looking at all like the team we expected them to be.
Not mathematically eliminated, but maybe psychologically eliminated are the San Francisco 49ers right now. And it's so hard to climb the mountain over and over again. Call it a Super Bowl hangover. Call it whatever you want. I mean, there was just a story today that Trent Williams and his wife lost twins.
Devastating story.
In pregnancy. And Charvarius Ward lost a 2-year-old daughter a few weeks ago. 49ers wide receiver rookie Pearsall got shot before he could even make his NFL debut. It's just been that season for the San Francisco 49ers. You can't blame Super Bowl losses on everything. And if they didn't lose some games when they were healthier earlier on in the season that would allow them to maybe overcome some of this, then they would be in a position where I would think, man, maybe they can rally and they can still do something and be a playoff team this year. But the Lions are still on the schedule, and they're about 1 loss away from it really, really being over. And even the players who are on the field playing are pretty banged up as well. Christian McCaffrey goes back on IR. He takes his backup Jordan Mason with him. So pretty bleak picture right now for the San Francisco 49ers in 2024.
And that has raised questions about the future of this organization. Not necessarily. We had Adam Schefter reporting yesterday that there have not been discussions about the jobs of John Lynch, the general manager, or Kyle Shanahan, the head coach. But there are real questions about the viability of this team moving forward. Trent Williams closer to 40 than 30. You have George Kittle getting up there in age. Deebo Samuel with all the miles on his body. And now another season where Christian McCaffrey can't stay healthy. Are you and our boy Eric Crocker over on Locked On 49ers, have you guys been talking about, hey, is the window, do we have to talk about the window at all?
The window is done. The window that was there is done. Now, do they custom fit a new window? And what does that look like is the question. Certainly,
do they have to call zoning? Do they have to get contractors? Like, what is the process? A lot of red tape they got to go through.
You might as well, if you have to, if you have to start calling the city and making sure you're getting the right permits, maybe you just need to make a new addition on the house. Maybe that's where they're at right now. But the new look 49ers in 2025 should be a little bit different than the old look San Francisco 49ers. They got a lot of draft picks. They might have another really high pick. And remember, this season's starting to look a lot like the 2020 season for the San Francisco 49ers, who were in revenge mode, coming off of a Super Bowl loss that time, went through a bunch of injuries. And Kyle Shanahan had the gumption that offseason to do something kind of crazy and trade up in the draft for a quarterback. Might this season give Kyle Shanahan the opportunity to do something a little crazy that he might not have done if everything was just on board and the Niners had a nice little run and went into the playoffs? And so potentially very interesting offseason ahead for the San Francisco 49ers while, maybe they go into evaluation mode the rest of the way. It looks like rookie Isaac Guerendo is going to be the starting running back for a little while. You got to start getting the rookie first-round wide receiver Ricky Pearsall more involved. 0 catches on like 65 routes in the last 3 weeks. That's
Cardio King.
Kind of inexplicable at this point to me. And, make sure those veteran players that you are counting on in the future, make sure they're right going into next year. Fred Warner, why is he playing right now he's got a broken bone in his ankle? Heal that thing up.
I would be remiss if I did not ask you about the future of the quarterback, because I don't know if the 49ers would have done that Jimmy Garoppolo deal over again if they had a second chance on it. They kind of get a second chance on it with Brock Purdy here, even though Brock, as you have talked about and pointed out, has been a better quarterback than Jimmy Garoppolo ever was. But 50, 55, 60 million could be the price tag here. How does the way this season has gone, do you think, affect not just his value, but then his value to this particular version of the 49ers, especially if they go into reset mode?
It's really frustrating because I hate the economics of the NFL where you have a guy like Brock Purdy who's taking your team to a Super Bowl and is a really good quarterback and is playing for $900,000. That should never happen. Yeah. But you also shouldn't have to pay him $60 million either. Like, can we find a middle class? Can you pay the ninth best quarterback in the league the ninth most money instead of everybody just gets the most every single time? Every offseason, who's next up? You're not the best ever, but guess what? You're going to get the most money that's ever been paid to anybody in the history of the world now at your position.
The answer is no, Brian.
Yeah.
We cannot do that.
You know what's very interesting to me, talking about 2020 parallels, you know what happened late in the 2020 season? Is the Niners got blown out by Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills that year. And I really think that Kyle Shanahan sat there on the sideline saying, you know what? I'd really like to have one of those. And he went and tried to go get one, spent 3 first-round picks to go up and get Trey Lance. Could Kyle Shanahan say to himself, look, we can hang with, there's not that big of a drop-off to Sam Darnold, who we can sign for a fraction of the price, and maybe go back in the draft and try to develop something else and still be able to pay all these other guys, and we'll have a better football team than paying Brock Purdy the same amount of money that the Bills are paying Josh Allen.
You can stay up to date all year on the San Francisco 49ers by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On 49ers on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Coming up, why would an at-large team in college football risk playing in a conference championship game? Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. You can also check out future bets on the NFL. The loss on Sunday night really hurt the 49ers' chances to win the NFC West, but they aren't totally out of it. FanDuel has them at 14-1 to win the West. They're only 2 games back. Is it crazy that I like that at 14-1? The Seahawks are favored just slightly over the Cardinals. Seattle plus 140 to win the division. Arizona plus 180. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. There are only 12 teams who get a shot at the national title. For some teams with just 2 losses, they look like potential playoff teams. Drake Toll from Locked On Big 12 brings up an interesting question for teams possibly risking playoff positioning for a chance at a conference title.
One reason. Give me one reason why Miami should be in the college football playoff over BYU. Please. One reason. Give me one reason why Alabama, South Carolina, Ole Miss should be ranked above BYU, and why the degree of separation should be so dramatic between those schools and Colorado. Why Ole Miss, I'm reading the AP poll right now, which I hope to God does not mimic the college football playoff poll this week. Tell me why Arizona State at 10-2 is behind Alabama. and why Kansas State is behind Ole Miss. But I want to table those and go to 10-2 BYU. Here's the first point that I'll make. Kansas State, Iowa State. I will yell into this microphone next Monday for whoever loses that game. They've won 10 games, and the committee told us the loser of a conference championship game will not be harmed, will not be hampered by the loss in the conference championship game. Otherwise, why would you play it, really, So I understand that the rhetoric the committee has given about conference championship losers not being hurt is a lie. They're going to look at the loser of the Big 12 championship and say, oh, that's another loss. Thanks for playing. I'd almost rather, I'm getting fired up. I would rather be BYU at 10-2 than BYU in Arlington, who loses and goes 10-3. Weird thing to hear. And BYU fans like, no, we want a chance to at least play for it. But from a college football playoff standpoint, I would rather be out of the conference title than in it and lose.
And this raises a bigger question, frankly, about conference title games, especially as realignment has altered the landscape of college football. It's not just these 2-loss teams who could play their way in or play their way out of an at-large bid. The same goes for a potentially undefeated team, a number 1 team, a team worried about their playoff positioning in a year where things may be a little more muddled at the top, let's say. Or you just want, if you're a head coach, to have an undefeated season. If you're a program who hasn't had one of those in a while, feels pretty good. Coaches tend to get paid bonuses for things like that. You get paid by wins, bonus money. There's real stuff at stake. It's not always for the love of the game. There is got to be a plan in place for when teams start to say, are we sure these conference championship games are actually in our best interest? Is the money enough for everyone if they're not? These are questions college football is going to have to face sooner than later. And finally, USC, no longer a team that can win at the highest level of college football. No, that isn't my opinion. This is coming from their starting quarterback, who decided to enter his name into the transfer portal on Monday. Miller Moss said of his decision, there comes a point where there's a time to move on to new opportunities, and I'm hoping to better myself as a person and a player. Moss said that in his next step, he's going to look for a school that can compete for a conference championship and win, quote, at the highest level. He also wants a program that can ultimately help him develop for the next level. Considering the number of NFL quarterbacks who have been Trojans, it is pretty eye-opening to hear a current Trojan say that's no longer the case at Southern Cal. If you're catching this episode after hearing your favorite Locked On show, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Also, if you're a new subscriber to Locked On Sports Today, we're here for you with the biggest stories in sports every day. Coming up on the next Locked On Sports Today, will the Sixers ever hit a turning point, or are they just real bad? So at least until tomorrow, stay locked on sports today.
Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
Go to our video on demand. Click on sports at the top of your screen. There, you'll find past episodes of Locked On Sports Today, plus other Locked On shows on demand.